I'm on the Fox Den podcast here with Jade, also known as at Girl Untitled. Oh, excuse me, at It's Girl Untitled, an inspirational Twitter personality and blogger. Thank you for being on today, Jade.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I found you in the course of like somebody retweeted you, and you had some pretty introspective and awesome inspirational tweets. And I thought it would be good to have someone on who's really interested in and passionate about positivity, because it's sorely needed now.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd say I'm passionate about positivity, but also about embracing your negative moments too. So I think it's kind of a well-rounded form of positivity, if you put it that way.
I absolutely think that's essential, because, and we'll get to that, but there's really an emphasis on positivity overall. And there's like an unhealthy optimism there, where if people are feeling pain, they need to attend to that rather than just covering it up with a faux sort of positive paradigm. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I like to ask guests this question: what three people, alive or dead, would you want to meet if you could choose any people at all?
Yeah, I really like that question. And I think the person you interviewed last from the Let's Read,
Yeah.
I think he might have said this too, but I'm not stealing his answer. This was truthfully my first answer is Jesus. I think he might have said that. But I'm really, really interested in religious history and everything. And I'd really like to get the real honest to goodness story from the man himself, and just hear what his message was. But I won't go into the details on that, but I'd like to talk to him. And then Brene Brown, I'm a big fan of. I don't know. Have you heard of her? I think.
Absolutely have. I was going to get to that later. This is awesome. Yes, but keep going. Yes.
Okay. Brene Brown, she also did a lot with sociology in school, and that's like her entire life mission, all about vulnerability, and I'm huge on that. So I'd love to meet her and pick her brain and learn more from her. And then the other one is just a silly one, but either Derek or Dan from Big Brother. They were both contestants who won on Big Brother, and I have this weird, I think it's just fascinating, the psychological, sociological. I like seeing Big Brother from that standpoint, seeing people stuck in a house and just all the, So I'd like to pick their brains on it.
No, that's absolutely awesome. It's good to have some variability there among your choices. Like you have some big hitters throughout history, and then maybe some people that are just of personal interest to you. Yeah. I would say a lot of people will probably pick a religious figure like Christ, because there's so much surrounding those figures. They love to get the firsthand story. Yes, Brene Brown. Let's just go with that now. So I've heard a lot about her, and I've skimmed her works. I've read some. Haven't had the time to really sit down and read all of her stuff. Really like the messages. She does the Daring Way training now for therapists to actually become credentialed in her shame fighting methodology. So she's doing a lot of great stuff out there. And she's got a PhD. She's got a doctorate in social work. She's done her time. She's studied the stuff. She knows what she's talking about. So tell me what got you interested in her and what resonated with you, because that would be a great direction to go.
Okay, yeah. I actually only heard about her probably a year and a half ago. One of my really close friends, she's also a blogger with Our Weird Lives. Her name is Jordan. She introduced me to her, and it was funny because she told me how much I would like to read her stuff or listen to her stuff. And she said she talks a lot about shame. And I remember us being in the bookstore and me saying, yeah, I don't really have much shame. I'm really, open to talking about anything, and nothing really makes me embarrassed or anything. And I didn't really have this understanding of what she meant by shame. But as soon as I started reading, I actually prefer listening to Brene Brown's books, because she just speaks such in a way that you connect to. And the more she talked about shame and just how it's more of these vulnerable parts of yourself, and it made me realize how much I do have. So I'd say what really appeals to me about Brene is just the vulnerability part, about being open about those parts of you that you're weak with, and not seeing them as weaknesses necessarily, but working through them and how they can make you strong.
Yeah, like her book, The Gift of Imperfection, right? That reminds me of that one. That to me, that's a great title, first of all. And second of all, I think it's fascinating. I see this a lot in my work. People think when they hear the word trauma, they think, oh, I don't have that because I didn't go through a horrible sexual assault or wartime disaster, natural disaster. Well, there are all sorts of trauma, growing up in a house that is very dismissive or that doesn't allow for someone to grow is a trauma that I see often. People who really didn't develop their personalities well because they were continually just diminished and ignored. Things like neglect is certainly a form of trauma. Just like that with shame. It's about how it affects you on a fundamental level. What parts of you do you feel really small when thinking about? And I love how she puts it into language that people really can understand and that validates those small shames and things that everyone experiences that they maybe write off and allow to continue impeding them on their progress. So yeah, it's awesome conversation about her. We could go in so many directions there. Talk to me and give listeners a little bit of a background on what got you interested in human services and sociology, because you put that on your blog that's your degree. And so you and I are very similar in getting bachelor's educations in the human soft sciences there.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'd say my first major was just human services flat out. And it was based on the fact when I was 14, I was diagnosed with major depression and social anxiety and then slight OCD. And for the first time, I was able to sit down with a therapist and she taught me, I remember the thing that stuck with me the most was my thoughts were kind of way too intrusive and just running me. Like I had no control over, I was scared to socialize or anything because of the way my thoughts were just controlling me. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you have ever—
I think you're doing a great job. Yeah, I think many people will get what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially if someone's experienced it, I think they'd understand. But yeah, so it was such a overwhelming thing that I was struggling with. And she taught me that yes, those thoughts exist, but they don't have to have power. And she taught me how to hear the thoughts and see the thoughts and observe them from a distance, and how I get to pick which thoughts have meaning to me and how I don't have to go on this downward spiral of panic with all these things. So overall, that experience at 14 years old, that's pretty young to really realize that. I mean, you're just when you're first experiencing the world, it's really overwhelming in general. But anyway, I wanted to go to school to help people have that same realization. So that's what got me into human services. And then sociology, just through the classes I took, I gained a huge passion for that too.
That's absolutely awesome. I hear a lot of people detail these stories about how they were positively influenced by a therapist or someone with empathy and compassion, then went on to really get a fire for doing the same and helping others. So it's great to hear that. Love to highlight on the show anytime I can, because it really inspires people who think they might not be able to get through whatever they're in now, but it's definitely possible. So you've gone over this a little bit for me already, and I appreciate it, talking about Brené Brown. But are there any particular books or speakers, anyone else that really has inspired you on your journey?
Yeah, I would say in terms of speakers, I love listening to, I'll just type in motivation on YouTube and just kind of see compilation videos. It always just puts my head in the right perspective. But in terms of specific books, The Four Agreements, I do love that book. To me, it's like just the most simplistic Bible type thing for me in terms of way to live life.
Yes.
And then You Are a Badass. I really loved that book. It's by Jen Sincero.
Yes, I was going to say, I got that. It's hilarious. I got that as a gift when I graduated my master's program, because it's such a, the family member who gave it to me knew that I love that sort of very sensationalistic, to the point, branding. Therapy doesn't have to be boring. Mental health doesn't have to be boring. That's great. What do you like about that book? That's really impressive. I'm glad you brought that up.
You kind of said it. It's that straight to the point way about it. Because I hate saying that I like self-help, because it has kind of a
stigma.
Yeah. But I love self-help, but I like that type where it's like, okay, let's just get straight to the point. No bullshit, cause that's actually the other book on my list is Unfuck Yourself, Get Out of Your and Into Your Life. And when I first heard it, right now that's a really big trend is to have, fuck in your title, or, make it seem a bit, but in this case, this book, I listened to it. It's only 3 hours and 23 minutes on Audible. And it was just so straight to the point. It was just, it was just, hey, this is how you are, screwing up your own life without even realizing it sometimes, just with the simple ways you think and talk.
Yeah, I think that's crucial for people to realize is as soon as you gain mindfulness and awareness of your habits, then you gain the capacity to change them. And people can be daunted. They can find it extremely formidable and frightening that the change that awaits them, and they think, oh, it's going to take too much effort. Well, no more effort really. It's going to take a little more effort than what you're doing now in terms of noticing negative stuff and going off that paradigm, changing it to a positive one. And we have these programs, we have these things that these interpretive lenses. Once we see, okay, this is what I'm noticing, we can really start to, as we go in a moment by moment basis, recognize that. And that's what I love about your blog post. And I encourage every listener out there to check out your blog, the Girl Untitled blog, because you really lay things out in steps that take personal change and make it simpler. And that's really the key to good therapy and good self-help is, here's that word again, but it really helps people to see that it's doable and it's not this huge this momentous task. It starts with just the smallest action.
Yeah, the smallest thoughts, the smallest shift. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, of course. So, and I just want to dive right in here. I really enjoy your article about the top 9 favorite inspiring YouTube videos, because I think that gives people stuff to look at in their downtime, maybe at work or whatever. I hadn't really looked into Mel Robbins' 5-second rule, but looking at that, it's a great way to desensitize yourself and gather your courage before jumping into something. Do you mind sharing that with us a little bit?
Yeah, just like what it is and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. So Mel Robbins coined the term the 5-second rule, and she encourages everyone. She references how a lot of the times it only takes 5 seconds of hesitation for us to be like, nope, never mind, not going to do that. So she encourages everyone who listens or reads her book, The 5-Second Rule, to count down from 5 as if you are about to launch a space shuttle into space. And then as soon as you get to 1, you launch yourself into whatever it is that you're hesitant about. And I especially appreciate it because of getting out of bed early in the morning. So as simple as that, you can use it for. I still suck at it, but it does work sometimes. But basically, it's kind of like the idea of motivation being garbage. Sometimes most of the time, you're not going to feel like doing something. And this just tells you to count backwards from 5 and then just do it.
I love it. Yes, you're right. It's very difficult. People will sit and they'll kind of be in that interstitial space of will I, won't I, and her method for giving yourself a few seconds to gather your momentum, your motivation, and just go forward. It's great. It's wonderful. I'm going to start probably using that with clients. So,
great.
4 agreements. I love that you're into that. Clients kept telling me that they love that book, and so that's why I wanted to ask you if you liked it, and you hit that right off. It's such a simple heuristic, and it gets to things that we have a responsibility to do, but also things that we don't have a responsibility for. So others' actions are directed by their own internal projections, and we don't have to own those. That's based on one of the agreements there. So love that. Tell me how you were inspired, I mean, as much or as little as you want, to write the 5 mindset shifts that changed my relationship for the better, because I really enjoyed that.
Oh, good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I'd say what encouraged me with that is because of how I'm currently married. I've been married for almost 2 years now. And if you had asked me, 4 years ago, if I was going to be married, I would have said no, because my relationship sucked. And a lot of it really had to do, obviously the other person played a part, but I played a huge part in why the relationship sucked. And it was a lot of communication. And whenever I met my husband, he just met me where I was at and really taught me that it was something we could, I don't know, just the open communication and everything, and being more mindful. So that's what inspired me to write it, was just to let people know that it's possible for relationships to be healthy. Just because you have a history of unhealthy ones doesn't mean that they all will be. So I
Very
love those.
well said. I completely agree with that. So just for listeners out there to get a taste of it, there's 5 points, and you're on the same team, which is absolutely great. I think couples now, because I've seen couples before in my work, if they've lost that point of goodwill where they're not even trying to assume the best of the person, and there's not that foundation of any kind of trust, it's a very bleak prognosis if they're not willing to work on that again. And so that team perspective, as simple as it sounds, but viewing the other person as on your side is so integral. And I think it's not a coincidence you put that as the first one. That's the point that you have to be to eat for those other little helpful hints to even register.
Mm-hmm. So true.
Are you still putting forth effort? That's it. That's the second one. That's great. And are you your own people who need their own space? Again, boundaries is a huge thing. I've talked about that in other podcasts recently that I've recorded this weekend. The fact that boundaries are still such an elusive topic, even after there have been books out there for decades, it just goes to show it's very difficult for people to hit that midpoint of trusting people but not being engulfed by them. Mm-hmm. It's very unnatural for many people with attachment issues. Somebody who has anxious attachment wants to be right there all the time. Somebody with avoidant attachment just doesn't want to get close. So I love that you're putting out there, hey, it's okay to need space. It's great.
I think there's a lot of emphasis in relationships now with, once you're married, you're one, and
sure,
unit, and people take that so literally that they have to be this cohesive unit. And I think it's important to remind people that you can have those boundaries healthfully.
It is, especially because with our emphasis now, especially in the Western world, on a sort of shopping cart, swipe left, swipe right romance paradigm, mm-hmm. people will get spooked and frightened by the idea that, okay, you chose this person, everything that you do now has to be exactly in line with what their tastes are. Because let's be honest, people are going to be frightened of that, and they may not get married. They may not open up and have a wonderful relationship if the options are stay in kind of online dating limbo or enter into an almost emotional bondage with someone. I mean, that's not going to work. People aren't going to swallow that sort of responsibility, as they shouldn't. So one thing I really like, and I'm glad I have you on here as a woman, because let go of unspoken expectations. Now, that's not even a gendered thing. I don't want to get into trouble sounding sexist, because I certainly believe men and women can both believe that. But it's very surprising to see that, because I hear a lot of people talk about he should just know blank, or she should just know blank, right? Just the expectation that a partner can mind read. So seeing that was my favorite thing in your blog. Tell me more about that, about how you came to that point, because it's very impressive.
Yeah. And I think I get what you're saying with, you don't want to gender that, but it is true that I think a lot of women do want their partner to know, and I'm sure men do too, but just from my own perspective as a woman,
sure.
Because even if they should know what you want or what it is you need, there's even that just feeling of, even if they don't know, I just want them to know. And it makes it feel like it means more whenever they just know already. And
sure.
But I would just say that, to me, I think it's really important to remember that you just, like you said, you can't mind read. They can't mind read. And putting that expectation on the relationship makes things a lot worse. It sets yourself up for disappointment. And I'm at the point with my relationship where I'll just honestly tell my husband, hey, I really just need this right now, or I really need this. And sometimes he can't give it to me. Sometimes he can't. And it's really disappointing. But you know what? At least I told him, and we just made it out in the open like that. So I just think having that open communication is really important when, just say what you need. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, and I'll play devil's advocate for a minute, because I've actually had female clients who have told me that they have unspoken expectations, and they'll tell me what it is, be like, oh, I thought we'd spend the day together on our day off when it lined up, because my husband and I are both really busy, and he decided to just leave and do something else without asking me. Now, that's very callous, let me just say. So there are some unspoken expectations that, and I think the language gets us caught up here. obviously your intent is someone shouldn't have to mind read. Absolutely. Like if your husband doesn't know maybe that you want this instead of that one night for dinner, and you usually like whatever it is he assumed you liked. Okay. That's unspoken expectation. But there are certain unspoken implicit rules and agreements that go with a relationship, just common courtesy, that I think on the other hand, apart from your point, people now just take for granted. Like I would just assume if you and a girlfriend, or if you and your girlfriend as a guy had a time lined up to hang out, that you would probably do that if you don't see each other a lot, or things like that, that I think our generation has just moved away from some common sense of empathy. And I think we need to get that back. I don't know if that's something that you've noticed at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think maybe me and my husband are weird because we both like doing our own things. Now that I'm so used to
No,
him,
that's good. You lined up. No, that's perfect boundaries.
actually playing
Yeah,
paintball today, and I was just like, oh God, great. That's like I get the day to myself to read, and but yes, that's a really good point. I think that social norm of, just that expectation with relationships is kind of not around as much.
sure.
But I have a good.
Yeah, and we could get into the reasons for that, but that's beyond the scope of our video here. So, yeah, the reason I loved that article is your focus upon charity and kindness toward your partner, and just assuming the best of them and making things work. It's so much different than a checklist of what you need, what you're commanding a partner to do. It comes from a position of love rather than a position of a dogmatism or just utter need and a sort of mad degree of entitlement. I mean, it's just so rare. It's sad that it's rare to see that, but to some extent it is. So I also love your 9 favorite healthy habits that help me thrive article, because you really split it evenly between the physical and the mental health points. So I love,
Yeah.
I make my body hydration nation. That's pretty cute. That's pretty nice.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think balance is a huge, huge thing for me. My dad, my whole life, has always said everything in moderation, and I kind
Yeah,
of
mine too.
yeah, really, yeah. So yeah, everything in moderation, balance. I think I've had periods of time where I'm more obsessed with my physical health, and then my mental health lacks, and vice versa. So I think it's just important to have a little of both.
And isn't it fascinating how empowering one can sometimes empower the other? So if you're in a good mental state, then you can recognize, I may not physically feel like going to the gym today. Maybe I'll go for 5 minutes and see where it goes. And then if
Yeah.
you're feeling physically well from maybe working out or exercising, then you start to feel more confident mentally. It's fascinating how they're so interlinked, and we were as a Western culture so I would say lost in that knowledge for so long. We saw the body and mind divide rather than the unity. So I dig that you're not about that. You're really into uniting them.
Yeah, good way of putting it. I definitely agree with that. Definitely interlinked.
So one thing you wrote about that's a bit heavier, which is totally fine, that's in my
Mhm.
realm here, is why we needed 13 Reasons Why. Boy, that was a controversial show when it came out. 13 Reasons Why, the show about a teen's tragic suicide. And you went a great direction with it. So for people out there who haven't read it yet, it's essentially about cultural isolation and emotional unavailability. Now, beautiful terms for what I see as a sort of sociological coldness and isolation and disconnection there. Can you riff on that a little bit for us? You want to tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to write that? Because it was great.
Yeah, I haven't looked over that one in a while, but like
Sure.
I just remember that when it first came out, there was obviously, like you said, controversy with it. And a lot of people said it's going to inspire people to go kill themselves. But to me, I thought the bigger thing was that it showed people they're not alone in thinking that,
Yeah.
all those pressures and the way it can make you feel that way.
Right.
Um, and reaching out to people and not just reaching out to people that seem like they might be hurting, but that person who's hurting know they can reach out to certain people. So yeah, I just thought that was a really important thing for people to realize. And it was definitely a triggering show where, it's hesitant whether or not you should watch it, but I thought it was still an important show for just as a society to talk about, even if it was controversial.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I hear all the time whenever some kind of triggering or unsettling show comes out, oh, this is going to give someone the idea to commit suicide. Now, unequivocally, I can say that that's maybe a well-intentioned thought, but unequivocally, it's wrong. Because as therapists, we're trained. Ask clients that seem depressed and their behaviors change, and if they're down and they're noticeably different, ask them about suicide. Ask if they're thinking about it, because believe me, it's not going to plant an idea. If they didn't think of it, it's not going to drive them to it. It's better safe than sorry. There's this common culture. I think it really comes down to human nature, and especially in our culture, the idea that if you bring something up, it's going to plant the idea, or it's going to drive someone to it, and it's better to ignore. So sometimes people implicitly start with that. It's better to ignore something, and then they clothe that initial thought with justification. But again, therapeutically, we know, and people should take this seriously, asking others about suicide, talking about the if that's too strong a word, but the idea of wanting the pain to end, wanting to disappear, wanting to sleep and never wake up, things like that. Asking a severely depressed person about that stuff isn't going to plant it. I guarantee that they've thought of it if they're sufficiently depressed that you think they need help in the first place. So I love that you intuitively knew that, and that it's important to open up these conversations, because ignoring them isn't going to help. It's not at all. That's what separates true self-help from people who maybe like to play at it, is, are you able to have those conversations and direct people to resources?
Yeah. I think pulling it out of your head and actually having that verbal conversation, or, in this case, the audio visual version of it, of watching it on the show, it just makes it a lot more real. It makes you really play out those scenarios.
Of course. Yes. Now that can be very triggering for people in a way that just asking them about suicide isn't. So I agree with you. If people are feeling down, probably watching, listening, anything depressive media isn't going to be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I liked your How to Manifest the Life of Your Dreams article. It was really cool to hear about positive visualizations. Tell me what inspired you to do visualizations, if you can remember that.
Yeah,
it was a while ago, that article, I think.
Yeah, no, that one, I'm definitely it's more of a ingrained in my life type of thing than that topic of, the 13 Reasons Why was more of a hot topic type of thing. With visualization, one of the books that has influenced me the most, that I actually don't even like as much anymore, is The Secret.
This could be great. Okay.
Yeah, because I really loved it when I first read it. And I think what I liked was the idea, kind of like what we were talking about earlier with how you personally can change things. I liked the idea that this empowers you with that. If you just think about this, it'll happen. Now I don't like reading it, because for anyone who doesn't know what The Secret is, it's all about the law of attraction, and what you put forth into the universe will come back to you. So if you think a lot about money, money will come to you. Which it's not that simple, but that's the gist. Yeah. And so I think some people take it that way, though, that, oh, it didn't work because I just thought about money and I didn't get a check in the mail like the person in the book did. So basically, for me, visualization means, and I can't remember the term that you said, it's very similar to, where it's the frequency illusion. Is that what?
Oh, yeah, the frequency illusion and the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, which I can talk more about. But yeah, yes.
Okay, Bader-Meinhof. Okay, because I like that. I think I remember reading about it. But
yeah.
So basically, to summarize, I liked that book of the idea of what I think about, I can make happen in my life. But I wanted more. A lot of people saw it as this magical thing, so they would just reject it, or they would, and so I wanted to explain the logic behind it, so you can realize how much power you really do have in that.
Absolutely.
And to me, it's just what you focus on, you can bring to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
But you just have to, because when you focus on it, you actually will make choices and do things in the direction of that, rather than just saying, yep, I want it, and magically it's there.
Yes. No, I love that. So people really, even therapists, some who I know and work in close proximity with me, really like The Secret. And I think you hit on it. I think those sorts of positive starting points are great. Here's what happens, though. People can often, so in the past, people may have been told that they weren't praying hard enough, or they weren't believing hard enough for a miracle, and that shames people that are already very hard on themselves. And so then that's kind of the straight up religious view of a sort of spiritual abuse, is that's the religious brand of it. And then you get the pseudo spiritual, new age, almost secular spirituality view that if you are not manifesting hard enough, which becomes a verb that is so nebulous. It's easy to beat yourself up when you don't know what you're even supposed to be doing besides thinking positively. But I've had clients who were all subjected to almost a sort of abuse of quasi spirituality, of their self-esteem was very compromised, and they thought that they weren't visualizing or manifesting hard enough. And I talked to them about the fact that there really aren't easy solutions to life. There are easy steps toward a more complex solution. And when people beat themselves up internally for not thinking positively enough, it's just the same cycle as someone being told they're not praying well enough. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've ever noticed people who just really take this stuff seriously and really condemn themselves when it doesn't pan out immediately.
It's a very black and white way of
It
looking at
is. It is.
it.
And so I love that you wrote about start with see your goals in mind as the end goal here, the prize, and see things that get you toward that. It's very therapeutic. And if that sounds simplistic, it is, because that's the paradigm you're using, the skeletal framework. And then it's all the actions that get us there that make up the meat of it. So it's very good stuff. So okay, sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say simply just that, and sometimes those actions won't get you in that direction, but
Sure.
you'll at least learn along the way. And I just think that's important too for people to realize, because a lot of people won't even take that first step just out of fear that it won't work.
And that goes to you encouraging people to use the 5-second rule, which was great.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the Bader Meinhof phenomenon comes from someone who noticed that name, which is the name of like a German paramilitary group of all things. So it wasn't named after the founder. It was named that this guy started hearing this name everywhere after he heard it once. So it's that selective, it's the frequency illusion, the recency effect, the recency illusion. You hear something and then you hear it everywhere. So and I love the way you boil it down to, I'm looking at your tweet here, I saved it. Your brain has a filter for what you notice. It picks up on what you've been focusing on and shows you similar stuff. Yeah, like YouTube or Facebook. Yes, that's very true. It's our mental algorithms. So we start to notice and selectively observe that which we continually feed ourselves and continually think of. It's very simple to think about how our ability to become depressed, if we have these same thoughts we're feeding ourselves about what is wrong with us, and then we see things that confirm it, right? And we get into the confirmation bias. You can see how we can think our way into a pit. And so this is the way to kind of go against that, maybe not for severe depression, but definitely for people who tend to overthink themselves into things that are negative.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of with the law of attraction, in conjunction with that, is that, people say, oh, well, why would this just magically happen? And that is the magic of it, is that if you are focusing on that you want to be a motivational speaker, you're going to notice opportunities that give you that step forward, that are going to connect you with people who could help you, give you up your opportunities, learn new things. But if you're not focusing on it, you won't pick up on those cues.
So I want to open the floor up here to you a little bit and ask if there's anything, and this is kind of a spur of the moment thing, is there anything that you've noticed that's a real gap in the mental health world today, or that you wish you saw more of in psychotherapeutic fields? If not, that's okay.
I would say, and it's partially why I didn't go further into being a counselor. And out here, I moved from Illinois to Oregon after college, just on a whim. And I've went to probably 3 to 5 different counselors over the last 5 years. And I still haven't found one that I connect with. And it's fine. I mean, because to me, I mean, at this point, I don't really need one, but there was a time when I really did. And it really sucked not to get that connection, but I still was able to, take what I needed and leave the rest, or, whatever didn't resonate with me, which I think is important for people to realize. You won't always have a connection, but you can still get something from it, hopefully. But I would say the biggest gap in terms of the psychologists that field. I feel like sometimes the ethics that govern the counselor hold them back from really connecting with their patient. And that was what actually stopped me from going forth with being a counselor. And I wanted to go about it in a more entrepreneurial way. And that's why I really like what you're doing with your podcast, because it reaches people in a different way than just the conventional setting, which I think the conventional setting is extremely important though. So I'm not downplaying counseling.
I get it. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Talk to me. And again, you can decline. What about the therapist you had did you not connect with? And you can be totally blunt here because nobody, you.
Well, I know I had one, the worst one I ever had. I've actually considered, it's been too long now. I've considered reporting her to some kind of ethics board because.
Oh my God. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Thankfully I was stable enough at the time and had enough support to kind of talk me down after it and realize it was her more than me. But for a while there, I was struggling with drinking too much. And
okay.
I wasn't feeling like I was a full-blown alcoholic or anything, but it was something I wanted to get ahead of. And so I went to, my therapist referred me to another therapist, and it turned out she was she wanted to put me in a full-on rehab program. And I was like, oh, like, that's not really the direction I was I wasn't feeling, I'm open to everything, but I wasn't fully, ready for that. And she immediately took this assumption that I was, and I understand from her point of view, she doesn't know me, but I just think that something as a counselor, you're not supposed to make assumptions and immediately directly accuse your client of certain things, because that can trigger certain things and put them on the defensive mode. But basically what she was upset with was that, or not upset with, but whenever I said I didn't want to do a whole program, I just wanted to get some counseling to talk through the drinking and, what it was that made me want to drink more. She asked why I didn't think I needed it, and kind of, I don't know how to put it into words exactly, but, and it's been a long enough time, but I know the stuff she actually asked me was so, like certain things I shared with her, she said, yeah, we're going to talk about things you should share and not share with people. And because I told her something about someone who, like a really traumatizing event that had happened to me based on drinking. And she was like shaming me for telling her that so quickly into the session.
Are you serious?
Yeah, because it was like when we first came in, I said, okay, so I said, hi, yeah, I'm Jade. I'm just wanting to get better about my drinking. It's not too bad yet, but I've put myself in some bad situations, and this happened to me twice, and I've realized that I have, don't want to put myself in that again. And she was like, yeah, we'll talk about certain things you just shouldn't tell people or something like that. And I was just like,
oh my God.
So it was just, and then it was, she asked me if I, whenever I said I didn't really want to do the outpatient therapy, I just wanted to go to counseling for this. I wasn't really, oh, that's what it was. She said she had just been to a party with somebody and they were drinking and she wasn't. And they asked her what was wrong with her or why she wasn't drinking. And she said, no, what's wrong with you? And I just thought that was a little rude to say to someone who's telling her they have a problem with drinking and then to say, what's wrong with you? Okay.
Literally not a fun person to have at a party.
yeah, right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So trauma is my passion. I love to work with trauma survivors. I love to do EMDR, which is a whole desensitization modality. And I'm amazed. Like if you're going into the field as a therapist and you take the code of conduct, which you do if you get licensed, like that's your code. That's not an option. You're representing it. So if you have the power to diagnose people, collect money from insurance by billing, which you do if you're licensed, then it is your duty to hear what clients have to say and not shame them for it, for God's sake. What do you mean what you tell people and what you don't? Yeah, maybe what you tell a stranger, but you should be able, but a stranger who's your therapist that you just met, totally culturally acceptable and professionally acceptable to tell them of your trauma. So I just want everybody out there to know that if you've got somebody who's billing themselves, literally billing themselves as a helper to you, that you're paying for it, they better be able to listen to what you're telling them. Now, if you tell them that you're suicidal or homicidal, they have a certain obligation to the code of conduct to report that. But apart from that, or apart from telling them about ongoing abuse that you're taking part of, or of a child, or an older adult that you know about, which we have to report as well. Your therapist should be able to handle this stuff and listen to it respectfully.
Respectfully. I think that's a big part of it. It's one thing to assume in your mind and have it in the back of your head when you're listening to your client, but
Yeah.
immediately abruptly say it. And to me, the two main things with me, I would like to start doing a sort of life coaching type thing that's like counseling, but not
Yeah.
so much. But my two main things are, you meet the person where they're at, because that's the only way they're gonna, you have to get to that middle ground. And then also remember, they're the expert in their own lives, even if they don't know everything yet, obviously. And so for me, just the way she assumed she knew more than I did about my, or even if she did, even if it was where I was in denial, it's just not the way you approach it.
No, it's not. And I love that you use that term. The client is the expert in his or her life, because that whether you realize it or not comes out of narrative therapy. Well, you thought of it independently, so you're not really inspired by it. But the term client is the expert in his or her story comes from narrative therapy, which is a brilliant approach. It's a wonderful. Clients are seen as kind of the archivists, the librarians of their own thoughts. And we're there to help them rewrite the story. We facilitate that, but we're not the experts. We can become more informed on what clients' needs are, which we should, but we always defer to what sounds good to them, what's uncomfortable, what's comfortable. Again, in life-threatening situations, we have to be a little more forceful, to say the least. But apart from that, which a lot is apart from that, clients really have the autonomy, and we're there to help push them along.
Yeah, definitely. I
Okay.
completely agree.
Well, sorry to hear about that stuff. It's always interesting for me to hear about what people's experiences or thoughts are in the mental health realm, because I think there's a real surplus of people out there becoming therapists that maybe should hold back from doing that, to put it mildly. And then people such as yourself who think it's kind of that paradox of, if you like Socrates, knowing that he has a lot to learn. And so he's told by the oracle in ancient Greece, you're the wisest man, because he knows how much he has to learn. A lot of people such as yourself have a real heart and real empathy for others. And you think, I'm going to consider this. I don't think I want to go into this. And then other people who may be headstrong and think, I'm a great therapist in the making. That might be the person you don't want. So I'm glad to hear that you've been able to come to some real moderation, come to a healthier lifestyle, though, in terms of drinking stuff. I think it's such a pernicious phenomenon where party culture can really encourage people to drink, whether or not they really want to.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I actually never was into party culture all through college. I was a total nerd about learning all my classes and all that. But once senior year came, I had a lot happen, and that's actually when I started my Twitter account.
Sure.
Started Girl Untitled, so that was cool. But that's when I actually started to, I guess, what you say, party more and stuff. And especially moving out to Oregon and everything. But yeah, it's really crazy, the party culture, with alcohol and everything, how widely it's promoted, and the way it can affect people. I mean, everyone differently. But.
Absolutely. So tell us more about the reverse golden rule, because when you talked about that in one of your blogs, I absolutely loved that. I think it's a real helpful inversion on a cultural norm.
Yeah, so the reverse golden rule, we all know the golden rule as treat others how you would want to be treated. And it's kind of pounded into our heads from a young age. And it's a great rule, so I'm not dissing it. But I really prefer the reverse golden rule, because I feel like it's not emphasized as enough as it should. But treat yourself how you would treat others. Because I think at this point, at least in my case, I've always treated others so well. But then when it comes to the way I talk to myself, I can be really freaking mean to myself and really put myself down more than I ever would anyone else. Even a stranger, even someone I didn't like that much, I probably wouldn't be. So with the reverse golden rule, I just think it's really important to be kind to yourself. And it's something my mom always taught me too. She said to talk to me the way I would my child self.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's an ego
it's really
state intervention. Like we all have different ego states that are different ages, and it just means we have different neural networks that were laid down different times. And in childhood, um, that's when we first start learning how to react to situations and what works best. So we'll
mhm.
drop into that instinctually when we're triggered into fight or flight mode. So it's great that you're able to recognize how would I treat this insecure part. I do a lot of that with clients. That's awesome. Your mom is very insightful.
Yeah, no, and she was actually, I remember my dad would kind of like make jokes about how she was really into self-help books when I was growing up. But even when I was a kid and couldn't read, she always had these highlighted pages of the books and I would flip through them and loved. So even from a young age, I was reading those books. So, but yeah, she's very insightful.
So this is a perfect segue from boundaries for people who maybe give too much and are too selfless and are kind of spread thin to the people who do it. So talk to me about the energy vampires and what inspired you to write about that, because gosh, is that a helpful paradigm?
Yes. So energy vampires, I can't remember the person who talked about it in a video, but um, basically an energy vampire is someone who literally sucks the life force out of you, your energy. And I have a pretty demanding job. um, I'm instead of being a counselor, I ended up becoming an administrative assistant. I work at a school district office. There's just a lot of, it's kind of like being a 911 operator for all of the schools in the district.
Right.
um, so there's a lot that goes on, but with any workplace there's drama, lots of different stuff. And um, i and I definitely notice when my energy is being drained by other people, and it definitely happens there a lot. So I felt like it was important to, a lot of the times what I write about is what I need to hear myself, honestly. But then it tends to resonate with a lot of people, so it works. And with energy vampires, I just think it's important to realize when your energy depletion is not just your own fault, and recognize who you're surrounding yourself with. So that's really what that post was all about.
And I love it. Yeah, thank you. So you even included a little helpful link to a Psych Central energy vampire quiz. So anyone interested in that should go to Jade's site and get the link to that at Girl Untitled, because it'll help you to determine how these people are affecting you. So a lot of the people who that we might consider energy vampires potentially have some personality disordered characteristics. So things like borderline personality disorder. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, people with disorders are certainly not the enemy. It's the problem that's the problem, not the person that's the problem. If people don't take ownership of their problems, though, then it can become a very tiresome situation. So people that expect a lot immediately and who have a real drive to fill that void through others, and who expect a certain level of coddling or tribute. So we're talking about narcissists too, can really fall under that label of energy vampire. So just everyone out there, just notice in your relationships, do people tend to give in what they ask you to put out? I mean, very simply put there. Do they tend to be very demanding? And beyond situations where you can tell they're having a hard time, because it can go the other way. We got to have some mercy for friends that are going through a tough time and that are usually very reliable. But people who typically are demanding a lot, but maybe giving a little, you've probably got some sort of energy vampiric presence on your hands. And for people that are empaths, it's like Velcro. It's like a hook going through a loop. It's very easy for people who have empathy and who are empathic to try giving into and helping people who are demanding a lot. The problem is that it's a vortex, a black hole of demand that usually can't be filled from the outside. That person who has those needs or who's constantly demanding has to work on themselves to learn that you can give yourself that sort of care and can't always rely on others. I don't know if that's a tangent or that you're kind of talking about that stuff too.
Oh, definitely. That's exactly like all of that. I'd say the simplistic way you put it, with how much are they taking rather than giving, and then the empath part. I could go on for hours about empaths and just how much it's important to protect. It's such a gift, but also it can be a curse if you aren't mindful of it and take care of yourself with it.
Yeah, that really fires me up because I have a lot of clients who come to therapy and are empathic and they're drained, male and female, and they come in wanting to learn how to put up with stressors better, and they label it that way. And I almost at this point now know that that's kind of a code for they're an empath and they think they need to handle stuff more. And really the answer may be putting up boundaries, which to some empaths is more frightening than just putting up with more BS. But if it's frightening to people, it's usually, not always, but usually the more something's out of your comfort zone, the more frightening it is, the more you need it in terms of if it's something that everyone could benefit from, right? If you talk about boundaries, people are like, oh no, I can't do that. Maybe it's frightening because you're afraid of losing those relationships with people who really aren't healthy and who won't respect your boundaries. If you don't think you can talk to someone about boundaries without them freaking out, it's a really great indication that unfortunately boundaries are what you need the most, and it might not be a great relationship. So
yeah, and boundaries are definitely a problem, I would say, with a lot of empaths. Like, yeah, because you just spoke to my soul. Like, it terrifies me to say no to people or to draw a certain line, but I'm getting better at it, and the more I do, my mental health is so much better.
yeah, and again, I think a lot of empaths and highly sensitive people, whatever terminology we want to use, those who really feel the struggles of others and relate with them, they are a precious resource. And what ends up happening is they get sapped and tapped out and sucked of their energy by people sometimes who never give anything. And so I really don't like preaching the choir. I don't like when people try to get more from empaths because they know they'll do it, rather than giving themselves or getting it from the people who haven't given a fair share of emotional energy in the emotional economy. That's something I get on my soapbox about, because I even see it with other therapists. I see it with anybody who's kind of a care worker or has a heart for others, the tendency to get easily hooked into the lie that they could be doing more. And it's very pernicious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Absolutely. So I think this is a pretty good place to wrap up. I'm glad you listened to the Let's Read podcast that I did, because when you put on there on your 9 favorite healthy habits blog post that you like to listen to videos and podcasts, the Let's Read guy with his soothing voice does ASMR videos and reads creepy stories that are kind of fun to listen to.
I know. I thought that was so cool. I thought that was such a neat idea.
It really, you know what? I love that he's able to take something and that he's been humbled and inspired by the response to it. He's a pretty cool dude. Is there anything that we're leaving out, anything you'd like to throw in here that we haven't touched on?
I don't think so. I would just say overall that I just hope that everyone, what you get from this is just to be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself, and just always seek balance in life, whatever it is you need, and I think a healthy balance of being in and out of your comfort zone, physical, mental health, all of that stuff. I just hope that everyone always pursues that in their life.
Yes, beautifully said. So again, for everybody out there, I've been talking with Jade. You can find her at Girl Untitled is her name on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is at It's Girl Untitled, all one word. You'll be able to find her when I post this, so that'll be fine. Thank you so much for coming on today, and I encourage everyone to check out your blog.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was great.